We're going to see a movie in a little while about a place called Los Cedros, which I've been involved with for more than 25 years now, since its inception. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to tell a bit of a story about how it came into being through the actions of Australian conservationists. The story starts in 1979. I was living in northern New South Wales. We'd moved up to Nimbin about 5 or 6 years earlier, and in 1979 found ourselves part of what years later we realised was the first direct action in defence of rainforests, not only in Australia but as far as we know anywhere in the world, at a place called Terania Creek in August 1979. And a couple of hundred hippies stood between the bulldozers and the trees, and in those days it was really easy to get lots of media because this hadn't been done before, and I think that the society had yet to develop any antibodies to these kinds of theatrical expressions of people climbing up into the trees and chaining themselves to the machinery. And so we were, first item on the news night after night. And I guess the time was right because at the beginning no one knew that there was any rainforest in New South Wales. It wasn't called the rainforest, it was called the bastard scrub. And there was nothing romantic about it. It was kind of dismal and dark and full of leeches and damp, and people didn't think much of it back then. But 2 years later, an opinion poll found that more than 70% of the people of New South Wales wanted an end to rainforest logging, and Neville Wran's government came up with the historic decision to protect a string of rainforests from the border ranges all the way down to Barrington Tops, including the few hundred hectares near Nimbin where we'd been playing our games and getting arrested for a couple of years. From there, we'd sort of caught this bug and ended up, we got a letter from a group that was then called the Tasmanian Wilderness Society, run by a dole bludger called Bob Brown, asking us to come down and help set up a blockade down in Tasmania to stop the flooding of the temperate rainforest wilderness through the damming of the Franklin River. And that became the biggest such action in Australian history. More than 3,000 people came from all over the country, more than 1,500 people arrested, and that forest was saved as well. And the year after that, about 60 of us from Nimbin went up to the Daintree and Cape Tribulation for the tropical rainforests, and once again national parks and eventual World Heritage listing ensued. But by then we'd created the Rainforest Information Centre as a way of trying to spread this beyond Australia, because we'd started to learn about what was happening to rainforests all around the world. And also we started the Pegasus Networks, which was the first internet service provider outside a university or the government in this country. And so we were, experimenting with email at the very beginning. And that's how we came to be approached by a group in the United States, the Environmental Defence Fund, to join their campaign to reform the lending policies of the World Bank. The environmental policies were destroying many natural areas around the world. And as we progressed with this campaign, we discovered that Australia's aid agency, only about 15% of Australia's aid went through multilateral organisations like the World Bank. 85% was bilateral aid, country-to-country aid, and exactly the same policies that the World Bank was representing were part of the Australian aid program. And so we initiated a campaign to get a Senate inquiry into the environmental effects of the Australian aid program, and this resulted in far-reaching changes to what's now called AusAid, but was then called ADAB, the Australian International Development Assistance Bureau. And these included, ADAB had to do environmental impact studies for the first time. They had to obey Australian environmental laws, even if they were working in countries without environmental laws. And to rub salt in the wound, the Senate required ADAB henceforth to provide a new funding window called the NGO Environment Initiative to give $1 million a year to Australian NGOs to create new standards of environmental excellence in the delivery of Australia's aid. At the Rainforest Information Centre, we thought that there was very little chance of us getting any of that money because we'd been such a thorn in their sides. But to our surprise, for the 2 or 3 years that this funding window was open, every project that we proposed to them, they funded. And I think they were hoping that we'd be so busy writing proposals and reports that we wouldn't have time to harass them any longer. And one of those projects that they funded was Los Cedros. So by the time we heard about Los Cedros, we'd been involved in Ecuador for a couple of years. We'd received an aerogram from a man called Jaime Levy, a Peace Corps worker working with the AWA in Ecuador on the Colombian border, asking for help to protect their rainforests. And volunteers from our group went over there, led by Doug Ferguson from Nimbin, and helped to protect those lands and began to get involved in other projects. Doug lived over there for about 6 or 7 years in the end. And one of those projects was with the Warani. That was a huge project. They're known as the Savages. The Ecuadorian football club is named after them. And I've got a quote here from a review. Joe Kane wrote a book about them called Savages, and in his review, Tim Flannery wrote in 1996, "Only one conservation group wins approval from Kane, that is the Australian-based Rainforest Information Centre. He says that despite the presence of so many conservation groups, the RIC was the only one to be working with the Warani in any meaningful way." So during this time, this man, Jose Decu, who you'll meet in the film, had arrived in Ecuador and ended up working as a peasant labourer on the farm of one Don Pablo. And the only way for a peasant labourer to get ahead in the country at that time was to colonise a piece of land. And the land reform laws were such that if you could find a piece of unproductive land and fence it off and clear the trees, that was the first step to getting title to that land. And so Jose climbed up into the mountains and found the Los Cedros Plateau and started to clear the land, as several other people had already done. But something happened to him where he suddenly awoke to the incredible beauty and magnificence and spiritual qualities of that place, and he went in search of help to try and protect the area, and ran into Doug Ferguson in Quito. And this happened to be at the time when we were getting funding from the Australian government from this new funding window. So we put in a proposal, and to the amazement of the Ecuadorian government, the Australian government provided a couple of $100,000 to buy out the colonists who had begun to colonise this plateau. And the Ecuadorians were so startled by this that they handed over the rest of the plateau, all 11,000 hectares, to this organisation that Jose Decu, the draft dodger, had started, and that's how the Los Cedros Biological Reserve came into being. And we've been supporting them just a little bit here and there for the 25 years since then. There's always a crisis going on there. Last year it was illegal land development in one corner of the reserve. The police were quite willing to go and evict the developers, but they needed help to feed their mules and to buy their food and to pay for the expedition to get in there, and that's what we raised money for last year. And also raised money to buy the motion-triggered cameras that captured the wildlife that David Nicastro shot in this film that we're going to see. This year we've got another sort of funding drive that's on. We've got a crowdfunding program that's taking place at the moment to stop illegal logging and poaching and all kinds of stuff that's going on in there. And anyone who'd be interested to learn more about it and to stay in touch with this program, I'll leave a sign-up sheet outside with where you can put your email. This film is also entered into a film competition, and if it wins the competition, which depends on the number of votes that it gets, $3,000 more will go to Los Cedros. So anybody who signs up, I'll send you the link that you need in order to click on this film and help Los Cedros along in that way. So thanks very much, and hope you enjoy the film.